For those of you who are parents or, well, children, are children even watching this channel? Probably not. You may think toys are for you. Well, you're wrong! Toys are for us, the adult collector. Those of us who want to put their toys behind glass cases and never touch them. Just admire them as if they're pieces of fine art. They deserve a place in a museum and should be enjoyed from afar and shared online so that everyone can see how great your collection is. Okay, well, that's a big part of the emotional connection to why adults collect action figures. There are other aspects as well, such as nostalgia and acquisition, but what's really interesting universally is that no matter how you collect action figures as an adult, and no matter how you choose to display those figures, everyone tends to have their own set of rules. And what I mean by this are sort of self-created limits about what you're going to collect and what you're not. It's really there to help us manage how big our collection is, because without these kind of rules that we create, well, collections can kind of grow out of control very quickly, and we start just buying everything. So we tend to make up our rules for what we collect, and, well, we pretty much just make up these rules purely because eventually we're going to want to break them. And that's what I want to look at today, because it's an interesting phenomenon, the way adult collectors, and myself is included in that statement, that not only do we have these rules, but, well, we go against them. And there's many times where we buy things almost against our will. What I mean by that is it's about how we collect. So, for example, some people collect by character, like my buddy Chris loves Batman toys. For me, I like Doctor Doom toys. I will pretty much buy almost any Doctor Doom just because, I don't know, I just think he's cool and kind of silly in a way. I mean, you know. And for a lot of us, though, it's also about amassing a complete collection, not just one character like Batman or Doctor Doom there, but rather a team or series. One of them, for me, one of my larger ones, is 3 3/4 Star Wars figures. I love collecting them. They remind me of my childhood. They give me a sense of accomplishment. I get to look at them and appreciate them. But I also have very specific rules for what I buy and what I don't buy. As an example of one of the larger ones is that I will buy any original trilogy Star Wars figure. And a big part of this is because I'm sort of trying to recreate my childhood. Those 92 or 96 figures, however you do your count, as they slowly get remade in the modern line, I'm having a good time collecting that. Another way that I collect is by sort of finite group. So with Marvel Legends, I like to collect Spider-Man villains. With Star Wars, I will get any character from the original trilogy. With Marvel Legends, I'm definitely much more picky. And if you put out a Spider-Man villain like Electro here, well, I'm going to buy that. But you put out, say, an Avengers villain, maybe not so much. So why am I constantly trying to add up all of the Spider-Man villains? Why go after this? Well, a big reason is I missed out on the Toy Biz line in the 90s. This came out sort of between me being a child and adult collector. So getting the Marvel Legends Spider-Man villains now is kind of making up for that childhood dream I never accomplished of getting Spider-Man toys. Other characters like Beetle here, this was a kind of predetermined purchase. I knew I was going to buy this classic Beetle figure before he was even announced or made, meaning if he ever did come out, he was a declared purchase, and that's because he was one of the main villains in one of the first Spider-Man stories I ever read. So again, it's about nostalgia and capturing our childhood and having some control over it. Now with me owning Beetle, now, well, I can pose him and put him on my shelf, and I can feel control over that. But here's an interesting one. White Rabbit. Absolutely a legitimate Spider-Man villain and released in the Marvel Legends line. Alright, secret confession for all of you out there. I never heard of her before. I had never heard of this villain until she came out as an action figure. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I collected the comics as a kid. I've watched all the movies. When White Rabbit was announced, I had never, ever heard of her. She never appeared in any of the comics I bought in the 90s, but I am a big Lewis Carroll fan, too, so it kind of appealed to me from, that standpoint. But because she fit into my rule of buying Spider-Man villains, even though it was a villain I'd never heard of, I bought her anyway. All right, what's another example of toys we buy sort of against our will? Well, the ones that have that coolness factor, if you will. So while we have rules to help control how much we spend and how big our collections grow, because we only have a finite amount of room, mostly because we agree to live with other human beings, well, sometimes characters come out that are so cool we break our rules. So, one of my rules, or one of my collections, I like live action Doctor Strange. I think he's awesome. Well, it's probably because he's basically just magical Sherlock Holmes. But, what can I say? Is it a crush on Benedict Cumberbatch, or do I just love Sherlock Holmes and magic, and they came together in one live action character? Well, when What If series came out with a animated version of live action Doctor Strange, I didn't buy it. You'd think I would, because it's sort of an alternate version of a character that I really like that I've bought multiple times. But I don't buy animated Marvel figures. I buy the comic book and the live action versions, mostly the comic book. I make exceptions for live action, like Doctor Strange. But I did get an animated figure from the What If wave. And, well, it wasn't actually from the wave, but it was the deluxe figure. It was the Hydra Stomper figure. Now, this was a character created for What If, so there's no way I could have had any kind of childhood nostalgia collection to it. So he definitely doesn't fit into many of my rules or my existing collections. He's not a Spider-Man villain. He's not a Star Wars 3 and 3/4 original trilogy character. But he does appeal to another thing I love. One is robots, but two is sort of pre-industrial robots. I have a thing for kind of the steampunk Jules Verne era of technology. And every so often you get a toy that sort of fits in with this kind of visual, this kind of, feel. It's kind of that Iron Giant thing. I mean, obviously I love the Iron Giant movie. And so anytime there tends to be kind of a steampunky, robot-y figure, even if it doesn't fit in with any other collection I own, I tend to get it. All right, the last one, which I think is the most unique with action figure collectors, is what I call the I can't believe it's an action figure factor. So what do I mean by this? Well, every so often, toys come out, and you are just like, oh my god, I can't believe they made that. Like, whoa, mind-blowing, like the sail barge. Or when Black Series came out with a Jackson figure. This was a bunny rabbit character from the Star Wars Marvel comics from the 80s that was kind of considered the epitome of Star Wars silliness. But he made it into the Black Series as sort of a realistic-looking Star Wars character. So I kind of had to get him. Fin Fang Foom. I'm not a huge Iron Man or Hulk guy, but I love dragons and dinosaurs, just like I love robots. So yeah, I had to buy the whole wave just to get the Build-A-Figure. Glad I did. Because I don't know if we're going to get a second shot at one of these guys. Another example, Ian Malcolm hanging out with a giant puddle of pee, or amber, or I don't know, one big... He likes piles of stuff, doesn't he? Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge, giant Jurassic Park fan, but I love dinosaurs, and there's just something about, Ian Malcolm and the coolness factor, and to finally get a 6-inch figure of him. Hank Scorpio with the World of Springfield line. So this was one of those when the Springfield line was coming out. I was hanging out with my two best friends from college and high school. We all collected this line together. We actually had a bet that if they ever came out with a Hank Scorpio figure, whoever came closest to guessing the accessories was going to buy it for the other guys. So yeah, it was a figure that was like, wow, this is so cool. I can't believe they finally made Hank Scorpio. So while I didn't buy every Simpsons figure, I had to get this one. But the climax, the epitome, the perfect illustration of this is this toy here from McFarlane. All right, if you're looking at this and going, ugly man toy? Okay, so this is Dr. Caligari from the 1930s German expressionist silent black and white film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And if you're wondering why I even know about this or like this, it's because I was a film major at UCSB, and part of film major is taking film history. And I was really enthralled with this film because it's basically a mad scientist with a sleepwalker that he controls, the somnambulist. That's him there. And all of the sets were very sort of cardboard and edgy, and well, you can see how much it's influenced pop culture and theater for decades. This design aesthetic created by German expressionist cinema, and really the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is the prime example of this type of cinema. So when McFarlane Toys came out with figures of Dr. Caligari, especially, they came out while I was in film school. So I was actually, I'd seen the movie a quarter before, and then these showed up, and I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that exists. They made the Somnambulist action figure, even with, cardboard and bent lamppost props, just like in the movie. So, yeah, I would have never expected to buy this, but it came out and I had to get it. And that's a big reason because so many toys are limited. They're not on shelf forever. Yes, we've got He-Man toys on shelf now. Will we have He-Man toys on shelf in 2 years? Will we have Age of Apocalypse figures in 2 years? It's kind of like when a toy comes out, you gotta buy it when it comes out because it's not gonna last forever. And if it fits into your rules or it fits into your exceptions, you'd think that a movie version of Deadpool would be an evergreen toy at retail. Not so much. You can't get this anymore. It was only out for about, what, 4, maybe 6 months, about 2 years ago. So, yeah, toys are, Johnny on the spot, and retailers are constantly looking for the latest trend because they want to sell product. And if action figures aren't selling, they'll replace them. So, while it's a very slow build, I mean, creating a complete Fantastic Four in their 60s and 90s look took like, what, 8, 9 years? Ugh, yeah, but the payoff is awesome. And the reason we create these rules is so we can zone in on this and get this payoff. Sure, there's some toys that don't sell and will stick around for a long, long time, well past their window. But for the most part, if you're an adult collector, you know to strike quick, strike hard, and get the toys that fit within your rules, or break your rules. And that brings us directly into the final category. Buying a toy against your will because it's a hard-to-find variant or it's just, you're never going to see it again. And I'm talking about doing this with a toy that doesn't fit within your rules, is not part of a collection that you actively buy, but you see something in your knowledge of the industry and the hobby. Usually this has to do with chase figures. Not this, I mean like this type of chase figure. When Marvel Legends with Toy Biz, they used to do this a ton, where there would be a variant release. So a main version of a character, like in this case Wolverine, would come with his mask on. But a very small percentage of the overall run had an entirely different head sculpt altogether. Insert airplane quote. So the maskless version of Wolverine, the chase one, there were people who didn't collect Marvel Legends. But if you saw this, there was just this urge that you had to get it just simply because it was rare, even though it's not something you collected. It's crazy. As adult collectors, we buy things against our will all the time. And as long as you're just buying what you love and you're not hurting anyone, it's totally fine. I mean, it's just your wallet we're talking about. But it is an interesting phenomenon that as adult collectors, we often buy toys completely against our will and for a variety of reasons. Hey, are there any toys that you've done this with? Has it brought you into a new world of collecting, or do they just wind up on some bottom shelf or in a box and you never see them again? Let me know how you deal with this in the comments below. Love to chat about it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.